The massive Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Admiral Vex Thor of the Xeraxian Empire approached the central podium. His iridescent scales caught the light as he moved, 6 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of his growing irritation. The chamber housed representatives from over 300 species, each controlling vast swaths of the galaxy. Yet it was the tiny blue planet in an unremarkable spiral arm that dominated today's emergency session. Esteemed members of the council, Vex Thor began, mandibles clicking with each precisely pronounced word. I come before you today with grave concerns about our newest associates. He practically spat the last word. The humans have deployed what can only be described as the most baffling warship design in the history of interstellar conflict. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 43 standard cycles ago, barely an eye blink in galactic terms. Their rapid technological advancement had been impressive, if not concerning, but this was something else entirely. Ambassador Chin stood at the Earth delegation's platform, her expression carefully neutral despite the growing tension. At 36, she was the youngest chief diplomat humanity had ever sent to represent their interests, but her calm demeanor had already earned her respect among the elder species. Today would test that reputation. We have all witnessed the humans' peculiar approach to technology, Vex Thor continued, gesturing toward a holographic display that materialized above the chamber floor. Their solutions are often unorthodox. But this latest development defies all rational military doctrine. The hologram showed what appeared to be a massive cylinder rotating slowly in the void of space. Unlike the sleek, purposeful designs favored by most spacefaring civilizations, this vessel looked almost cobbled together, sections of it spinning in opposite directions, with what appeared to be exposed infrastructure jutting out at seemingly random intervals. The humans call it the US unorthodox, Vex Thor said, unable to keep the disdain from his voice. A fitting name, as it violates every principle of sensible warship design we've established over millennia. Ambassador Chen's assistant, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, leaned toward her and whispered, "They really don't get it, do they?" Chen shook her head slightly, eyes never leaving the hologram. "That's the whole point," she whispered back. On the chamber floor, Vex Thor was building to his conclusion. This vessel has no discernible weapons arrays, minimal shielding capability, and its propulsion system appears deliberately inefficient. And yet, his voice rose sharply, it somehow managed to neutralize 3 of our patrol cruisers in the disputed Arcturus sector without firing a single conventional weapon. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. The Xeraxian Empire possessed one of the most formidable fleets in the galaxy. For a seemingly unarmed human vessel to defeat 3 of their cruisers was unthinkable. "Order!" bellowed High Counselor X-Ray, their gelatinous form pulsing red with authority. "We will have order in these proceedings." As the chamber quieted, Chin strode forward to the human delegation's speaking platform. The eyes of hundreds of alien species turned toward her, many hostile, others merely curious. "High Counselor, esteemed members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice steady. "The United Earth government acknowledges the unconventional nature of our new defensive platform. However, I must correct several misconceptions in Admiral Vex Thor's assessment." She gestured, and the hologram changed, highlighting various aspects of the strange vessel. "The US Unorthodox is not a warship in the traditional sense. We prefer to think of it as a dynamic problem-solving platform. And as for the incident in the Arcturus sector," she paused, meeting Vex Thor's glare directly, "perhaps the Admiral should explain why his patrol cruisers were 16 light-years inside recognized Earth Alliance territory?" Vex Thor's scales darkened in what humans had learned was the Xeraxian equivalent of a flush. "The territorial boundaries are in dispute," he hissed. "Not according to the treaty your Emperor signed last solar cycle," Chin replied calmly. "Furthermore, no Xeraxian vessels were destroyed or even significantly damaged. They simply stopped working." Another wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. Disabling rather than destroying enemy vessels was almost unheard of in galactic conflicts. The Moravian delegate, a being composed of interlocking crystal structures, chimed in with a voice like wind through glass. "How exactly does this vessel function, Ambassador Chin? Our analysis teams cannot determine its operational principles." Chin smiled slightly. "With respect, that's precisely the point. Humanity has always been at its most creative when backed into a corner. The Unorthodox embodies our approach to joining the galactic community. We don't have the resources or experience to match conventional military doctrine, so we simply didn't try." The hologram shifted again, showing the strange vessel from a different angle. The rotating sections generate gravitational differentials that our engineers have learned to manipulate in interesting ways, Chen explained. The exposed infrastructure is actually a network of field projectors that can selectively alter localized physics in ways that are difficult to predict or counter. We don't need weapons arrays when we can temporarily change how reality works around a target vessel. The chamber had grown deathly quiet now. Even Vex Thor seemed at a loss for words. In the Arcturus incident, Chen continued, the unorthodox simply created a field that prevented certain energy transitions within the Zeraxian vessel's power cores. No permanent damage, no loss of life. Once they powered down their weapons, normal function was restored. High Counselor Xorake's form had shifted to a contemplative blue. This is disturbing technology, Ambassador. Some might call it dangerously destabilizing. Chen nodded solemnly. We understand those concerns, High Counselor. But humanity has always been painfully aware of our vulnerability since joining the galactic community. The unorthodox represents our commitment to self-defense without escalation. We have no imperial ambitions, we simply wish to ensure our survival. As she stepped back from the podium, Lieutenant Commander Jackson passed her a data tablet with an urgent message flashing on the screen. Chen's composed expression faltered for just a moment as she read it, enough for the keen-eyed observers in the chamber to notice. Is there something else you wish to share with the Council, Ambassador Chen? Xorake inquired, gelatinous appendages rippling with curiosity. Chen looked up, suddenly aware of the hundreds of alien eyes fixed on her. The message she'd just received would change everything about this already tense session. She took a deep breath. High Counselor, esteemed delegates. I've just been informed that 3 more unorthodox-class vessels have been completed and deployed to our border regions. The chamber erupted once more, but Chen raised her voice to be heard over the chaos. And our engineers have already begun work on the next generation. Admiral Vex Thor's facial scales flared in alarming patterns of crimson and violet, a biological warning sign that several delegates recognized and subtly shifted away from. The Zeraxian military commander slammed a clawed appendage onto the speaking platform. This is an act of aggression, he snarled. Deploying experimental weapons platforms in disputed territories. In our own territories, Chen corrected calmly. Territories recognized by the Galactic Council's own boundary accords. If I may remind the Admiral, the Zeraxian Empire signed those accords less than a cycle ago. High Counselor Xorake's gelatinous form rippled with concern. This session will adjourn for 1 standard hour while the Council confers privately. Their voice resonated through the chamber with finality. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Vex Thor, your delegations will remain available for questioning. As the chamber emptied, Chen and Jackson retreated to the small antechamber allocated to the human delegation. The moment the privacy field activated, Chen's diplomatic mask slipped, and she ran both hands through her short dark hair. That could have gone better, she muttered. Jackson pulled up schematics on his tablet. The unorthodox performed exactly as designed, and you handled the political fallout beautifully. What's the actual problem here, Ambassador? Chen gestured to the message still displayed on her own device. Those other 3 ships weren't supposed to be announced yet. That was a classified deployment schedule. Someone leaked it deliberately to force my hand in there. Who would benefit from that? Jackson frowned, his dark eyes scanning the room instinctively for surveillance, despite the privacy field. That's what worries me, Chen replied. Someone wanted this confrontation to escalate. Either someone on our side who thinks we're being too cautious, or someone who wants to make humans look like the aggressors, Jackson finished. Outside their chamber, the vast station hummed with activity. The Galactic Council's headquarters orbited a neutron star, a deliberate choice. The extreme gravitational conditions required sophisticated technology to navigate safely, ensuring that only species with sufficient advancement could even approach the station, much less dock with it. Humanity had barely qualified when they first arrived. 10 years earlier, the crew of the experimental vessel US Pioneer had stumbled upon the Zeraxian colony world of Ketvalen while testing Earth's prototype warp drive. The shock of first contact had gone poorly for both sides. Humans discovered they were tiny newcomers in an ancient galactic community, while the Zeraxians discovered that even primitive species could be dangerously unpredictable when cornered. The resulting skirmish had drawn the attention of the Galactic Council, and humanity found itself thrust onto the interstellar stage before they'd even properly left their own solar system. In the conference room of the UES Unorthodox, Captain Sarah Rivera studied the secure transmission from Earth Command with growing concern. At 42, Rivera had spent half her career in traditional Navy vessels before volunteering for the experimental unorthodox program. Her gray-flecked hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and the lines around her eyes had deepened considerably in the 3 months since taking command. "Engineering," she called, activating the ship's internal comm. "How are the field generators holding up after the Zeraxian encounter?" Chief Engineer Patel's voice came through, tinged with the pride of someone who'd built something impossible. "Better than expected, Captain. The gravitational lensing worked perfectly. Their targeting systems couldn't get a solid lock on our actual position. And the phase inhibitor fields shut down their reactors without any collateral damage." "Good," Rivera nodded, though no one could see her. "Because I'm looking at orders to proceed deeper into the Arcturus sector. Apparently, our little demonstration has attracted some high-level attention." Patel's voice lost some of its enthusiasm. "We're still running diagnostics on the main deflector array. Whatever the Zeraxians were using in those new cruisers, it wasn't in our database. Some of our systems took more strain than anticipated." "How long until we're fully operational?" 8 hours minimum. "I'd prefer 12. Rivera sighed. "You've got 6. Command wants us at the Arcturus relay point by 0800 tomorrow." She closed the channel and returned her attention to the orders. Something about this mission felt wrong. The Unorthodox had been designed as a defensive platform, a way to neutralize threats without escalation. But these orders would take them well beyond the defensive perimeter, into an area known to be heavily patrolled by Zeraxian forces. Back in the council station, Chin and Jackson were summoned to a smaller meeting chamber. Inside they found not the full council as expected, but only High Counselor XORAK and 2 other senior delegates. The crystalline Moravian and a tall, willowy being with copper-colored skin that Chin recognized as Ambassador Tlacme of the Alduvian meritocracy, one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations. "Ambassador Chin," XORAK began without preamble, "we have reviewed the sensor data from the Arcturus incident. What troubles us is not the capabilities of your vessel, but rather its purpose." "I don't understand," Chin replied carefully. "I've been transparent about its defensive function." Tlacme's voice was melodious, almost musical. "The issue, young ambassador, is that your defensive platform appears designed specifically to counter Zeraxian technology. The field modulations match their power signatures with remarkable precision." Chin felt a chill run down her spine. This was classified information. The Unorthodox had indeed been engineered with Zeraxian systems specifically in mind, given their long-standing hostility toward Earth. But that detail had never been shared outside the highest levels of Earth Command. "All defensive systems are calibrated based on known potential threats," she replied neutrally. The Moravian's crystalline form chimed softly as they spoke. "Our analysis suggests your vessel was not responding to aggression but was rather deployed as a deliberate test of capabilities against Zeraxian technology. The energy signatures show your ship activated its unusual fields before the Zeraxian vessels powered their weapons." Chen fought to keep her expression neutral. This directly contradicted the mission report she'd received. Either the Council had faulty data, or someone had lied to her about what actually happened in the Arcturus sector. "I will need to consult with my government regarding these findings," she said carefully. "Please do," Exorhe replied, their gelatinous form now pulsing with dark purple concern. "Because if it appears Earth is using these unusual vessels to provoke conflict rather than defend against it, the Council may need to reconsider humanity's provisional membership status." As Chin and Jackson left the chamber, her comm unit chimed with an encrypted message from Earth Command. The contents made her blood run cold. "What is it?" Jackson asked, noting her expression. Chin showed him the message: "Unorthodox proceeding to Arcturus Deep Station on intelligence regarding Zeraxian superweapon development. 3 additional vessels deployed to create containment perimeter. Diplomatic cover story, navigational error leading to accidental incursion." "This isn't defensive posturing," Jackson whispered. "We're sending the Unorthodox on an intelligence mission deep into their territory." Chen's eyes hardened. "And someone's making sure the Council knows exactly what we're doing even before we do it." Aboard the Unorthodox, Captain Rivera stared at the strange readings coming from the ship's sensors. The deeper they pushed into the Arcturus sector, the more unusual the spacetime distortions became. Something was very wrong here, and it wasn't just Zeraxian activity. "Captain," her science officer called from across the bridge. "I'm detecting gravitational anomalies consistent with... well, I'm not sure what they're consistent with. I've never seen readings like these." Rivera studied the display. The patterns looked almost like what the Unorthodox itself generated, but on a vastly larger scale. "Send everything to Earth Command encrypted channel," she ordered. "And bring us to full alert status. Whatever the Zyraxians are building out here, it's changing the fabric of space itself." The U.S. Unorthodox drifted silently through the debris field, its bizarre rotating sections temporarily locked in place to minimize its sensor profile. Captain Rivera stood at the viewport, watching fragments of what appeared to be a massive space station tumble past. The hull fragments bore Zyraxian markings, but the technology embedded within them matched nothing in Earth's extensive database on Zyraxian engineering. "Analysis complete, Captain," Lieutenant Park reported from her science station. "These debris patterns aren't consistent with battle damage or structural failure. This station was deliberately dismantled, and recently." Rivera frowned. "They knew we were coming." "Ma'am," Communications Officer Reyes interrupted, "we're picking up a transmission. It's on our encrypted frequency." Rivera turned sharply. "That's impossible. Those codes were generated less than 12 hours ago." "Nevertheless," Reyes said, "someone's broadcasting on it. Audio only, no visual." Rivera nodded. "Let's hear it." A voice filled the bridge, distorted and clearly disguised but unmistakably human. "Unorthodox, turn back immediately. You are being set up. Repeat, you are sailing into a trap." Back at the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Chin paced the small confines of the Earth delegation's quarters. The emergency session had been delayed 3 times already, with rumors spreading through diplomatic channels about a major security breach. Jackson had spent the last 2 hours trying to establish secure communications with Earth Command, but all channels were mysteriously congested. "Something's happening," Chin said, stopping mid-stride as her personal communicator chimed. The message was brief: "Deniable intelligence operation in progress. Maintain position that unorthodox actions are unauthorized. Earth Command." She showed the message to Jackson, whose expression darkened. "They're hanging the unorthodox out to dry." "But why?" Chin asked. "What could possibly justify?" The door to their quarters slid open without warning. Tlacni, the copper-skinned Alduvian ambassador, stood in the doorway alone. "Ambassador Chin," she said in her musical voice, "I believe we need to speak privately." Jackson stepped forward protectively, but Chin raised a hand to stop him. "It's all right, Commander." She gestured for Tlacni to enter. Once the door closed, Tlacni's demeanor changed entirely. The serene diplomatic mask fell away, replaced by tightly controlled urgency. "Your vessel is heading into grave danger. The Zyraxians have been experimenting with technology they do not fully understand, technology they discovered rather than developed." Chen's eyes narrowed. "How do you know where our ship is?" "Because the Alduvian meritocracy has been monitoring the Arcturus sector for nearly 50 cycles, Tlacni replied. "Long before humanity achieved space flight. What the Zyraxians have found there is problematic." In the depths of space, the unorthodox had changed course, moving away from the debris field toward a massive dust cloud that obscured long-range sensors. Captain Rivera had made the decision to investigate the warning rather than dismiss it, a choice that had divided her senior staff. "If this is a trap," Chief Engineer Patel argued, "we're flying straight into it." "And if it's legitimate intelligence," Rivera countered, "ignoring it could be catastrophic. Besides, whoever sent that message knew our encryption codes. That's either someone from Earth Command or a security breach so severe that we're already compromised." The ship's sensors pinged urgently. "Multiple contacts," Tactical Officer Rodriguez reported. "Zyraxian signatures, but something's off. They're not moving like Zyraxian vessels." Rivera leaned forward in her command chair. "Explain." "Zyraxian ships move with mathematical precision, Captain. These are erratic, almost organic in their movement patterns." The main view screen showed blurry images of vessels emerging from the dust cloud, their silhouettes unmistakably Zyraxian in design, but their movements indeed seemed wrong, almost lurching. "Hail them," Rivera ordered. Reyes shook his head after a moment. "No response on any frequency, Captain. But they're definitely scanning us." "Activate the primary deflector array," Rivera commanded. "Prepare the gravitational lensing system." As the crew rushed to comply, Science Officer Park called out from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting the same spacetime distortions we observed earlier, but much stronger. They're emanating from those ships." Rivera felt a chill run down her spine. "They've reverse-engineered our technology." "Impossible," Patel protested. The principles behind the unorthodox are based on theoretical physics that took our best minds decades to develop. Unless, Park said slowly, they didn't develop it at all. At the council station, Tlacni had revealed information that left Chin speechless. According to the Alduvian ambassador, the region now known as the Arcturus sector had been quarantined for millennia after the discovery of artifacts from a civilization far more advanced than any known species. The quarantine had been maintained by the older council races until the Zeraxian Empire, in their expansionist phase, had stumbled upon the restricted zone. Rather than report their discovery as interstellar law requires, Tlacni explained, they began experimenting with the technology they found. Technology that manipulates the fundamental forces of reality in ways similar to your unorthodox. Chin felt her mouth go dry. Are you suggesting that humans and Zyraxians independently developed the same technology? Tlacni's copper features formed an expression Chin couldn't interpret. No, Ambassador. I am stating with certainty that neither of you developed it independently. The question is, how did your species acquire principles that have been quarantined for 20,000 years? Before Chin could respond, the station's alert system blared to life. Red emergency lighting bathed the room as a computerized voice announced, multiple unauthorized warp signatures detected in proximity to the station. All delegates proceed to secure locations immediately. On the bridge of the unorthodox, chaos reigned. 3 Zeraxian vessels had surrounded them, but instead of conventional weapons, they were generating spatial distortions that interfered with the unorthodox own systems. They're using our playbook against us, Rodriguez shouted over the alarm klaxons. But their implementation is crude, unstable. Captain Rivera gripped the arms of her command chair as the ship shuddered violently. Target their field generators with our phase inhibitors. If they're using technology similar to ours, the same countermeasures should work. That's just it, Captain, Patel called from engineering. Their technology isn't similar to ours, it's identical but wrong somehow. Like someone tried to copy our designs without understanding the underlying principles. Rivera made a split-second decision. Divert all power to the main deflector. We're going to attempt full field inversion. Patel's voice cracked with alarm. Captain, we've never tested that configuration. The theoretical models suggest it could create a cascading failure in any similar technology within range. Exactly, Rivera replied grimly. If they're using corrupted versions of our tech, a properly calibrated pulse might overload their systems. Or it might overload ours, Rodriguez pointed out. Rivera nodded. Hence the stupidest warship design philosophy, Lieutenant. Redundant systems, isolated power grids, counter-rotating sections that can function independently if needed. We built this ship to try crazy ideas and survive them. As the unorthodox crew raced against time to implement Rivera's desperate plan, the situation at the council station had deteriorated into pandemonium. 3 vessels of unknown configuration had dropped out of warp dangerously close to the station, ignoring all hails and protocols. Those aren't Zeraxian ships, Jackson said, studying the emergency tactical display. They don't match any known configuration in the database. Chin stared at the screen, a horrifying realization dawning. No, but look at their movement patterns. They're identical to the unorthodox. Tlacni stepped forward, her copper skin now pale. They have arrived. Who has arrived? Chin demanded. The ones who left the technology, Tlacni whispered. The ones who have been watching, waiting to see which species would discover their gifts, and what they would do with them. The main lights failed, plunging the station into emergency backup lighting. Through the viewport, Chin could see one of the unknown vessels approach the station. Its design was both familiar and utterly alien. Sections rotating in complex patterns that somehow reminded her of the unorthodox, but with an organic quality that no human engineer could have conceived. Ambassador, Jackson said urgently, Earth Command is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're ordering the unorthodox to stand down and return to Earth space immediately. It's too late for that, Tlacni said, her musical voice now somber. Your stupidest warship has done exactly what it was designed to do, attract attention. Just not the attention you expected. In the Arcturus sector, Captain Rivera watched as her tactical officer counted down to field inversion. The Zeraxian vessels had closed to optimal range, their crude versions of the unorthodox technology creating a chaotic web of spatial distortions around her ship. Field inversion in 3, 1. Rodriguez announced. Rivera braced herself, silently hoping her ship would live up to its bizarre design philosophy. As the unorthodox main deflector discharged, A blinding pulse of energy expanded outward in a perfect sphere. For a moment nothing happened. Then, as the pulse reached the nearest Zeraxian vessel, something unprecedented occurred. Instead of overloading their systems as Rivera had hoped, the field inversion caused the spatial distortions to synchronize. Suddenly, the chaotic interference patterns aligned into a complex, geometric formation that linked all four ships together. "Captain," Park called out, her voice filled with awe and terror, "I'm detecting a subspace aperture forming. Something's coming through." Rivera watched as space itself seemed to fold inward, creating a swirling vortex between the four ships. "All hands brace for impact," she ordered, though she had no idea what impact to expect. From the vortex, a signal emanated, not on any human or known alien frequency, but somehow directly interfacing with the unorthodox systems. As text began to scroll across their main screen, Rivera realized with a chill that humanity's stupidest warship had just made first contact with something far beyond their understanding. The message was simple: the test begins now. The test begins now. The words hung in the air of the unorthodox bridge like a physical presence. Captain Rivera's mind raced through tactical options, diplomatic protocols, first contact procedures, none of which seemed adequate for whatever was happening. "Captain," Park called out, her voice unnaturally steady, "the vortex is expanding. Spatial distortions are increasing exponentially." Rivera opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. Secure for possible dimensional shift. This is not a drill." She turned to Rodriguez. "Power down all offensive systems. Whatever's happening, I don't want us perceived as hostile." Before Rodriguez could comply, the view screen flickered, and the text message was replaced by a visual, a being unlike any Rivera had ever seen. It appeared to be composed of interlocking geometric shapes that shifted and realigned with fluid grace, occasionally revealing glimpses of what might have been eyes or other sensory organs. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds rather than through the ship's audio systems. "Captain Sarah Rivera of the United Earth Ship Unorthodox. Your species has activated the beacon." "I'm Captain Rivera," she confirmed, standing from her chair. "What beacon? What test?" The geometric being shifted again. "The technology your vessel employs. It was not designed as a weapon, but as a key, a beacon to signal when a species has reached sufficient understanding to be evaluated." Back at the Council station, Ambassador Chen and Commander Jackson had been escorted to the station's central control nexus by Tlacny. The room was filled with representatives from the elder races of the Council, all focused intensely on holographic displays showing both the standoff at the station and the situation in the Arcturus sector. "We are receiving a transmission from the unknown vessels," announced the technician. The main display shifted to show the same geometric being that Captain Rivera was confronting. However, its message to the Council was very different. "The quarantine has been breached. 2 species have activated Nexus technology prematurely. Evaluation protocols have been initiated. High Counselor Exoricase gelatinous form pulsed with agitation. This is unprecedented. No species has triggered the ancient protocols in over 12 millennia." Chin stepped forward. "What are these ancient protocols? What is happening to our ship?" Admiral Vex Thor, who had been unusually silent, finally spoke. "Your primitives have stumbled upon technology you should never have discovered. Technology my people have spent decades reverse engineering." Tlacny turned to Chin, her copper features solemn. "Long before the current council existed, a civilization we know only as the architects seeded the galaxy with technological relics. Tests, they called them. Each operated on principles that required certain levels of scientific understanding to activate. The quarantine was established to prevent immature species from triggering them before they were ready." "Ready for what?" Jackson demanded. "Judgment," Vex Thor hissed. "The right to exist." On the unorthodox, the situation had taken an unexpected turn. The geometric being had extended an offer that left Rivera speechless. "Your vessel's configuration," it communicated, "displays unusual characteristics. You have implemented Nexus technology in ways unprecedented in our records. The redundancies, the counterintuitive design elements, the deliberate inefficiencies, they serve functions we did not anticipate. It was designed that way to be unpredictable," Rivera explained, still trying to process that they were communicating with what appeared to be some kind of ancient galactic gatekeeper. "To overcome our technological disadvantages through unconventional approaches." The being's geometric form shifted in what might have been interest. "This adaptability will be evaluated. You will join with the Zeraxian vessels in a unified field test. Those vessels just tried to destroy us, Patel protested. Incorrect, the being replied. They attempted to synchronize with your field technology, though their implementation is flawed. The true test requires cooperation between species who have discovered the Nexus principles. In that moment Rivera understood. The Stupidest Warship design, it wasn't just about making something our enemies couldn't predict. It was about creating something flexible enough to adapt to unknown variables. Captain, Reyes interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the Zeraxian vessels. They're requesting to speak with you directly. The main view screen split, and for the first time, Rivera saw the commander of the Zeraxian forces, a hulking figure with iridescent scales and 6 eyes that blinked in an unsettling rhythm. Human Captain, the Zeraxian began, I am Fleet Commander Korzex. It appears we have both been maneuvered into this position. At the council station, a horrifying revelation had silenced the control room. The display showed hundreds of similar geometric anomalies appearing throughout the galaxy, each centered on worlds or stations belonging to younger spacefaring species. They're evaluating everyone, Shin whispered. This isn't just about humans and Zyraxians. Admiral Vexthor's scales had paled to an ashen gray. The ancient record spoke of this, the Great Assessment. When species who discover architect technology are judged collectively. Judged on what criteria? Chin demanded. Before anyone could answer, a secure channel notification flashed on Chen's personal communicator. The message bore the highest Earth Command encryption and contained just 7 words. Project Prometheus was never about weapons development. Chen's blood ran cold as pieces began falling into place. She turned to Jackson. The Unorthodox wasn't just an experimental defense platform. Earth Command knew about the ancient technology. Impossible, Tlackney interjected. The quarantine has been maintained for thousands of years. Your species has barely left its solar system. Not impossible, Shin said, her mind racing. Just improbable. What if the architects didn't just leave their technology in space? What if some of it was planet-bound? What if humans found relics on Earth itself? At that moment, the geometric being appeared on the council station's main display. Collective judgment requires collective action, it announced. The Earth vessel Unorthodox and the Zeraxian squadron must merge their technologies to stabilize the dimensional aperture. Failure will result in dimensional collapse affecting 12 sectors. Success will advance both species to Tier 2 status. Chen watched in horror as tactical displays showed the spatial distortions around both the Unorthodox and the Zeraxian vessels increasing in complexity and intensity. They can't possibly coordinate something like that, Jackson said. Our technologies are fundamentally incompatible, even if they're based on the same principles. But Chen had just received another classified message, this one containing technical specifications that she immediately forwarded to the Unorthodox. Maybe that was the point all along, she said quietly. On the bridge of the Unorthodox, Rivera studied the technical data they just received from Ambassador Chen with growing amazement. These are integration protocols, she said. Earth Command designed the Unorthodox specifically to interface with Zeraxian technology. Chief Engineer Patel looked over her shoulder, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding. This stupid design, the redundant systems, the counter-rotating sections, they're not just defensive measures. They're adaptability measures. The ship was built to synchronize with alien tech. Rivera opened a channel to the Zeraxian commander. Commander Korzex, I'm sending you technical specifications. I believe our ships were designed to work together. The Zeraxian's 6 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. Explain, human. The inconsistencies in our designs aren't flaws, they're compatibility nodes. Your ships have components that match the exact frequency gaps in our systems and vice versa. For several long moments, the Zeraxian commander was silent, presumably reviewing the data. Finally he spoke. This suggests a level of coordination between our governments that would be unprecedented. Or, Rivera said slowly, it suggests we were both being guided by something else all along. As this revelation spread through both crews, the geometric being's form appeared to brighten. You begin to understand, it communicated. The true test was never technological mastery, but recognition of necessary cooperation. At the council station, the elder races watched in stunned silence as the human and Zeraxian vessels began a complex synchronization process, their previously chaotic energy fields gradually aligning into a stable pattern. I don't understand, Shin said to Tlackney. If Earth Command knew about this, why not tell us? Why the secrecy, the apparent hostility with the Zyraxians? Admiral Vex Thor gave a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Because, human, neither of our governments trusted their own people to cooperate without the pressure of apparent conflict. They created enemies to force innovation, knowing that only under threat would we develop the necessary technologies quickly enough. A new message appeared on the main display, this one simultaneously broadcast to every council species and both the human and Xeraxian vessels. Phase 1 complete. Compatibility established. Proceed to Phase 2, Truth Exchange. Truth Exchange? Jackson asked. Tlacni's copper features had gone completely still. The complete sharing of all technological, cultural, and historical data between the evaluated species. No secrets, no hidden agendas. Total transparency. Chen looked at Admiral Vex Thor, whose scales had shifted to a deep crimson. Is that why your government has been so hostile? To prevent this moment? The Admiral's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. Would your government willingly share everything with a species you've been taught to fear? He gestured toward the display showing the unorthodox and Xeraxian vessels now linked by synchronized energy fields. And yet, it appears we have no choice. As the geometric being's presence expanded throughout the control room, a new message formed in everyone's mind simultaneously. The true test begins now. The true test begins now. The words echoed through the council station and across the linked vessels in the Arcturus sector. Ambassador Chen felt a strange sensation wash over her, as if her mind was being gently but insistently opened. Around her, the other delegates showed signs of experiencing the same phenomenon. Even the normally impassive Tlacni appeared disturbed. What's happening? Chen asked, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. The truth exchange, Tlacni replied. It is not merely informational. In the vastness of space, Captain Rivera and Commander Korzex experienced the same sensation. The boundaries between their ships, between their minds, seemed to blur as the geometric being's presence expanded. Our vessels are fully synchronized, Captain, Patel reported, his voice strained. But the energy readings are off the charts. Whatever this truth exchange is, it's drawing power from sources I can't even identify. Rivera noticed something strange happening to the main view screen. It no longer showed just the exterior view of space or the Xeraxian commander. Instead, it displayed a rapid succession of images. Earth's earliest space missions, classified military installations, diplomatic meetings she'd never known about, and alongside them, corresponding Xeraxian moments. First contact mishaps, military planning sessions, secret weapons tests. They're showing us everything, she whispered. Every decision, every mistake, every secret. On Korzex's vessel, the Xeraxian crew witnessed the same parade of truth. Centuries of their empire's history laid bare alongside humanity's brief but tumultuous emergence into space. This was inevitable, Korzex said, his voice carrying easily to Rivera's mind now. Our scientists found the first architect artifact in the Kelvoran system 60 cycles ago. Contained predictions. Calculations suggesting that primitive Earth would soon develop technologies that would either complement or neutralize our own. And so you began monitoring us, Rivera replied, understanding flowing between them now. But then your military leaders saw an opportunity to ensure technological superiority by recovering more artifacts. As did yours, Korzex countered. The Prometheus Project. Your government recovered an architect relic from beneath Earth's Pacific Ocean 30 of your years ago. Rivera's eyes widened. This was beyond any classification level she'd ever known about. That's why our ship designs seemed purposefully built to interact. Both sides were working from the same blueprint. At the council station, the truth exchange had progressed to reveal even deeper secrets. Chen stumbled backward as the full scope of human and Xeraxian manipulation became clear. This wasn't just governments keeping secrets, she said to Jackson, whose expression showed he was receiving the same revelations. This was coordinated. For decades, elements within both Earth Command and the Xeraxian High Command have been communicating. Admiral Vex Thor's scales had turned almost white with shock. Impossible. I would have known. No, Shin said, the truth becoming clearer in her mind with each passing moment. You were deliberately kept ignorant. Just as I was. We were the perfect representatives of mutual distrust, while others worked to ensure this exact moment would happen. The geometric being's presence pulsed with what might have been approval. The veil of deception parts. Now you understand the nature of the test. High Counselor Exorica's gelatinous form rippled with agitation. This violates every protocol of the Council. Species cannot be manipulated toward predetermined evolutionary paths. Yet your Council has done precisely that, the being replied, by quarantining knowledge and technology, deciding which species are ready and which are not. The architects reject such artificial constraints. In the Arcturus sector, the linked vessels had begun to generate a new kind of field, one that stabilized the spatial distortions rather than enhancing them. As the field expanded, the swirling vortex that had threatened to collapse entire sectors gradually calmed. "We're actually doing it," Patel said in disbelief. "The dimensional aperture is stabilizing." Rivera felt a sudden clarity of purpose. "Because we're finally working together without pretense or hidden agendas." She opened a direct channel to Corzex. "Commander, I propose we take this cooperation one step further. Full integration of our field technologies." The Zeraxian commander's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "You propose to share your most advanced military capabilities?" "Willingly." "I propose we stop thinking of them as military capabilities," Rivera countered. "What if these technologies were never meant for war? What if they're tools for exploration, for understanding the fabric of reality itself?" Meanwhile, at the council station, the Truth Exchange had revealed one final, staggering piece of information that left the elder races in stunned silence. "The architects aren't some long-dead civilization," Chen said, the knowledge flowing through her mind like a river. "They're us. Or rather, what we might become." Tlacny nodded slowly. "The geometric beings, they're not evaluating us for some external authority. They're representations of future evolutionary states of our own species." Admiral Vexthor struggled to process this revelation. "You're suggesting these beings came from the future?" "Not exactly," Chen replied, the understanding becoming clearer. "They exist outside conventional time. They're what happens when species like ours master the technologies we're currently stumbling to understand." The main display showed that similar truth exchanges were occurring across dozens of worlds and stations throughout the galaxy. Species that had been rivals or even enemies were suddenly being forced to confront centuries of deception and manipulation, not by the architects but by their own leaders. In Arcturus, the field generated by the unorthodox and the Zeraxian vessels had expanded to encompass the entire region. The dimensional aperture, instead of collapsing, had transformed into a stable gateway. "Captain," Park called out, "I'm detecting something coming through the aperture. It's another ship." The vessel that emerged defied easy description. Parts of it seemed to phase in and out of existence, while others appeared solid but geometrically impossible. Yet somehow, its design incorporated elements that were unmistakably human alongside others that were clearly Zeraxian. "A joint venture," Corzex said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Not just any joint venture," Rivera replied, the Truth Exchange allowing her to see what the Zeraxian commander was also realizing. "That's the prototype for a transitional vessel. The first step toward becoming like the architects." As this understanding rippled across both crews, the geometric being's form shifted once more. "Phase 2 complete," it communicated. "Truth Exchange successful. Initiating Phase 3, choice." At the council station the same message appeared. Chen looked questioningly at Tlacny, whose copper features had finally relaxed into something like acceptance. "Each species now faces the choice," Tlacny explained. "Whether to embrace collaboration and the path toward becoming like the architects, or to reject it and remain as they are." "But that's not really a choice at all," Jackson protested. "Either evolve or stagnate?" "No," Chen said slowly. "I think the choice is more fundamental than that. It's about whether we trust each other enough to walk this path together." The geometric being's presence seemed to brighten. "The human ambassador understands. The choice is not about evolution but about intention. Will you use the architect technologies to dominate or to connect? To separate or to unite?" As this ultimatum hung in the air, Admiral Vexthor stepped forward. "And if some among us choose domination? What then?" "Then the technologies will remain inert," the being replied. "The fields will destabilize. The dimensional apertures will close. You will continue as you were, isolated and limited." In the Arcturus sector, Captain Rivera and Commander Corzex found themselves facing the same choice. The fields connecting their vessels had begun to fluctuate, responding to the uncertainty in their crews' minds. "We could use this technology to ensure human dominance in the galaxy," Rodriguez said quietly. "We have better implementation than the Zeraxians." "We could." "No," Rivera interrupted. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that kept us locked in meaningless conflicts." She turned to the main view screen, where Corzex watched her intently. "Commander, I choose cooperation. Whatever comes next, humanity stands ready to face it alongside the Zeraxian people." For what seemed like an eternity, Korzex was silent. Then, to the surprise of both crews, he performed a Zeraxian gesture that hadn't been seen in generations, a ceremonial crossing of his primary arms that historians recognized as the ancient sign of alliance. As does the Zeraxian Empire, he declared. Throughout the galaxy, similar choices were being made. Species after species, faced with the truth of their shared potential, chose connection over isolation, cooperation over conflict. At the council station, Chin watched as the geometric beings began to fade from view, their purpose apparently fulfilled. But before they disappeared entirely, one final message formed in the minds of all present. The cycle continues. As you have been tested, so shall you test others. As you have been guided, so shall you guide. As the beings vanished, the strange ships that had appeared at the station and across the galaxy began to fade as well. In their place, they left behind small artifacts, technology that would help guide the next phase of galactic development. Admiral Vex Thor approached Chin, his scales now a calm blue. It seems we have much to discuss, Ambassador. Chin nodded. And much to build together. As the council station returned to normal operations and the crisis in Arcturus sector resolved itself, Captain Rivera stood on the bridge of the Unorthodox, watching as her crew worked alongside their Zeraxian counterparts to study the transitional vessel that had emerged from the aperture. You know, Patel said, joining her at the viewport, I always wondered why Command insisted on such a bizarre design for this ship. The stupidest warship in the fleet, everyone called it. Rivera smiled. Maybe because it was never meant to be a warship at all. As if to confirm her words, a final message appeared briefly on her personal communicator, one that neither the architects nor any known species could have sent. It contained just 5 words, Project Prometheus, Phase 4 initiated. Rivera looked out at the stars, suddenly understanding that humanity's journey was only beginning. The Unorthodox hadn't just been humanity's first step into a larger galactic community, it had been their first step toward becoming something greater than they had ever imagined. 3 months after the events in the Arcturus sector, the UES Unorthodox docked at the newly constructed Harmony Station, the first joint human-Zeraxian facility in history. Captain Rivera watched through the viewport as her crew mingled with Zeraxian engineers on the station's main concourse. The sight still felt surreal, even after all they'd been through together. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be casually walking alongside Zeraxians, I'd have recommended a psychiatric evaluation, Commander Rodriguez said, joining her at the window. Rivera smiled. And yet here we are. History has a way of making fools of us all. The Unorthodox had undergone significant modifications since the encounter with the architects. With the Truth Exchange allowing for unprecedented technological cooperation, both human and Zeraxian engineers had worked to refine the ship's systems. What had once seemed like bizarre design flaws now revealed themselves as deliberate adaptability features that allowed for continuous evolution. Captain, Reyes called from his station. Ambassador Chin is requesting permission to come aboard. Granted, Rivera replied. Have Chief Engineer Patel meet us in the conference room. And extend an invitation to Commander Korzex as well. When Chin arrived, she wasn't alone. Admiral Vex Thor accompanied her. His scales, now the calm blue that humans had learned, indicated thoughtful contemplation rather than the aggressive reds and purples they had first associated with Zeraxians. Captain Rivera, Chin greeted her with a warm smile. It's good to see you again. I believe you've met Admiral Vex Thor under more favorable circumstances since our last encounter. Rivera nodded respectfully to the Zeraxian officer. The joint training exercises have been enlightening, Admiral. Indeed, Vex Thor replied, mandibles clicking in what Rivera now recognized as amusement. Though I still maintain that humans have an unnecessarily complicated command structure. The group made their way to the conference room, where Patel and Korzex were already deep in discussion over holographic schematics of what appeared to be an entirely new class of vessel. The integration is proceeding faster than expected, Korzex was saying as they entered. The transitional technologies from the Aperture vessel have accelerated our understanding exponentially. Chin took a seat at the head of the table. That's actually why we're here. Earth Command and the Zeraxian High Council have reached a decision regarding Project Prometheus. The room fell silent. Since the encounter with the architects, both governments had been remarkably open about the previously classified project, revealing how the discovery of architect artifacts had guided technological development for decades. But Phase 4 had remained shrouded in mystery. As you all know, Chin continued, the Truth Exchange revealed that the technologies we've been developing were never meant for warfare but for something far more profound, the ability to explore dimensions beyond our conventional understanding of spacetime. Admiral Vexthor's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. What the exchange did not reveal, however, was why the architects chose our species for this test. We have spent 3 months analyzing the artifacts left behind, and we believe we finally have an answer. He gestured, and a holographic representation appeared above the table. A map of the galaxy with hundreds of points highlighted in different colors. These are all the species that experienced the truth exchange, he explained. Notice anything unusual about their distribution? Rivera studied the map. They form a pattern, almost like a web. Rivera continued scanning the document. And apparently we're getting representatives from 3 other species as well. This is starting to feel less like a starship and more like a floating United Nations. Isn't that the point? Patel asked. The unorthodox was never meant to be just a human achievement. It was designed to bring us all together. 2 days later, Rivera stood on the bridge of the unorthodox as the newly integrated crew took their stations. Commander Korzex had accepted a position as her first officer, a historic first that had made headlines across both human and Zeraxian space. The bridge now featured stations modified to accommodate different physiologies, with interfaces designed for various sensory capabilities. All departments report ready, Captain, Korzex announced, his voice carrying that distinctive Zeraxian resonance that humans were still getting used to. Thank you, Commander, Rivera replied. She opened a ship-wide channel. This is the captain speaking. As you all know, we're embarking on an unprecedented mission today. The Unorthodox has been recommissioned not as a warship, but as a vessel of exploration and diplomacy. Our task is monumental, to help prepare the galaxy for the convergence event that the architects warned us about. She paused, looking around at the diverse crew, humans working alongside beings they had once feared as enemies. Many of you have asked why our ship was designed the way it was, why humanity built what some called the stupidest warship ever seen. Now we know the answer. It wasn't stupid at all. It was adaptable, flexible, built to evolve and incorporate new ideas, just as we ourselves must evolve and grow beyond our limited perspectives. Throughout the ship, crew members listened as their captain articulated the philosophy that would guide their mission. The architect artifacts have a recurring symbol, Rivera continued. A spiral within a spiral, representing how the choices of individual species affect the development of the entire galaxy. Today we begin a journey to ensure that our collective choices lead to transformation rather than destruction. It won't be easy. There will be resistance, skepticism, and setbacks. But if we've learned anything from recent events, it's that the impossible becomes possible when we work together. At the diplomatic reception later that evening, Ambassador Chin found herself standing beside Tlacny on one of Harmony Station's observation decks, watching as the Unorthodox prepared for departure. I never thought I would see such cooperation in my lifetime, Tlacny said, her copper skin reflecting the starlight. The Alduvian records contain prophecies about a time of great change, but even our oldest scholars dismissed them as allegorical. Chin smiled. Humanity has a saying, truth is stranger than fiction. Indeed, Tlacny agreed. Though I must admit, I find myself troubled by one unanswered question. Only one. Chin laughed. I have a list. Tlacny's expression grew serious. The architects revealed themselves as potential future states of our own species. But why intervene now? Why not allow us to develop naturally? Chin had pondered this same question. Perhaps because there's nothing natural about development in isolation. Maybe they, our future selves, realize that cooperation isn't just beneficial, it's essential for survival. As they spoke, the unorthodox engines began to glow, preparing for departure. The ship's unusual design, once mocked as inefficient and bizarre, now seemed prophetic, a physical manifestation of the principle that true strength comes from adaptability rather than rigid perfection. Ambassador Chin, Admiral Vexthor called, approaching with High Counselor XORAK floating beside him. The Council has voted to officially recognize the Prometheus Initiative as a multi-species cooperative endeavor. That's wonderful news, Admiral, Chin replied. XORAK's gelatinous form pulsed with what Chen had learned to recognize as cautious optimism. It was not a unanimous decision, but a significant majority. The evidence from the truth exchange was compelling. As the dignitaries continued their discussion, Captain Rivera stood on the bridge of the Unorthodox, ready to embark on humanity's strangest and most important mission yet. Take us out, Helm, she ordered. Standard departure protocol. As the ship pulled away from the station, its counter-rotating sections creating that distinctive, seemingly chaotic movement pattern, Rivera couldn't help but smile at the thought of how the unorthodox must appear to observers, still the strangest-looking vessel in the fleet, but now a symbol of something profound. The ship that had once been derided as the stupidest warship ever seen, had become the galaxy's greatest hope. And humanity, once dismissed as primitive newcomers, had helped spark a transformation that would echo across the stars for generations to come. As the unorthodox engaged its main drive and accelerated toward its first destination, Rivera felt a sense of purpose unlike anything she'd experienced before. Whatever the convergence might bring, whatever challenges awaited them among the stars, they would face them not as isolated species struggling for dominance, but as a united front, different voices joining together in common cause. The stupidest warship in history had turned out to be the smartest idea of all.